What of time and space? Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
What's the perfect solution to being the head of not one, but two families living around the corner from each other and trying to maintain the secret of your double life? Why, having two Patrick Troughtons, or Patrick's Troughton, or something. Unfortunately, one of them is an evil dictator with a secret underground base full of Kool-Aid drinking hip young people who idolise the man, so it's up to the Doctor to impersonate the mendacious Salamander in a Doctor Who meets James Bond epic we're calling You Only Wed Twice. I'm Iain.
And I'm Mark, and we're probably going to get sued. Anyway, moving on. In the year 2030, only one man seems to know what action to take when the world is hit by a series of terrible natural disasters. Salamander's success in handling these monumental problems has brought him enormous power. From the moment the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria land on an Australian beach, they're caught up in a struggle for world domination. A struggle in which the Doctor's startling resemblance to Salamander plays a vital role. And we'll be back after this.
I don't know where you stand, Mr. Kent, but you and this Salamander are obviously on opposite sides. That at least is clear. But which side is good? Which side is bad? And why should I interfere?
Well, you're the only man who can help save the world. But isn't that what Salamander's trying to do? Don't you understand,
just
Salamander?
a minute. Jamie, you're unusually quiet. What do you think?
Well, to save the world, well, it sounds grand, but... No, we couldn't turn our back on a challenge like this, Doctor. Well, at least I know you wouldn't.
We don't know anything about these people.
Bastard saved her life and just wounded because of it.
Oh, but Jamie,
well, she didn't. She was.
Look, we're right about Salamander. It won't take you long to find out for yourselves.
And welcome back. And we're joined again by the wonderful Paul Scoones. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Well, that's the pleasantries out of the way. Iain, time to inflict a little bit of...
Are you suggesting in some way that what I do is not pleasant?
Well, it depends on the outcome, really, doesn't it?
Well, I suppose it does. Paul, let me think. We've done this before, but nevertheless...
Quite some time ago.
It was a long time ago, and things are different now, and... There's no mercy anymore. These are tough questions, and if you're found wanting, then it's the time lash for you. It's a tinselly death as we face.
Oh my giddy aunt!
The mind probe.
Oh, not the mind probe.
No, not the mind probe.
Lovely. So, it's going to be quick this time around because we've got a lot to get through in this show. So we're just going to have 4 questions, general knowledge. Are you ready?
No, but go anyway.
Okay. Question 1. Harder Than You Think is the top-rated Spotify song by which band?
I have absolutely no idea.
I think I know where he's going with this, Paul. Iain, do you just want to put your fingers in your ears for a minute?
I'm not a Spotify listener, and I don't keep up with current music. So
it's really not current. But I'm going to
just look away now.
Yeah, I'm going over here.
Oh God,
Paul. I mean, I could be completely sending you up a blind alley here.
No,
I vaguely remember. I do vaguely remember there was a band called The Enemy. I don't know if it's them.
Oh.
Can you see where he's going with all the tenuous links?
Okay.
Maybe throw that in as a potential answer. I could be wrong, but you know. Okay, Ian, you can come back now.
Sorry, I was down there looking at my bottom shelf. There's some really good books. Have we got an answer?
Shall we go with the enemy?
So I'm gonna have to fail you there. It's Public Enemy.
Okay.
No.
Right.
Oh, well, you know, I had the right general.
Still no.
No.
Question 2. Name Denis Villeneuve's 2014 thriller starring Jake Gyllenhaal.
I feel like I should know this. No, mine's gone a blank.
I thought he was a Formula One driver. I know, it's Jacques Villeneuve, wasn't it?
They're probably all related. There's Jacques, and before that, his father Gilles.
Can I have a clue?
It's along very much the same lines as question 1.
Right. So I'm going to guess that it's either got an enemy in it or a world in it.
You wouldn't be cheeky enough to have the same answer for both questions.
In fact, if you can cast your mind back to the answer you gave for question 1,
Right.
that'll stand you in good stead.
The enemy.
Is the correct answer.
Is it? Goodness.
Yeah.
Well, hey.
So, right, okay.
There we go.
Question 3. Which 1998 film starred Will Smith and Gene Hackman?
Was that Enemy of the State?
Oh, how right you are.
Straight in there.
That was lovely. Okay, final question.
Sorry, Ian, just sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Was that the movie that had Will Smith buying some lingerie for his wife? And it was a very unusual store you go in where you just have these ladies wandering around in lingerie to show you what lingerie looks like, in case you didn't know.
I am starting to wish I'd ever seen this film now. You make a Will Smith film sound
came
good.
Back to my mind.
Yeah. Can I do question 4, or do you want to sort of linger in the lingerie sort of cul-de-sac?
Well, you carry on with question 4, and I'll just have a bit of a think to myself.
Paul, I think Mark's going to have slightly more fun for the next 20 seconds than you and I. Can you name the Nancy Price novel which was filmed in the early 90s starring Julia Roberts?
Well, given that's a yes-no answer, if I say no, then I'm right?
Really annoyingly, technically, you do have me over a linguistic barrel there.
He's got there.
because my answer is quite correct. I've said no, and that is absolutely accurate.
I mean, that's a point. That's definitely a point to Paul. Definitely. Just for fun,
Dan,
can I suggest?
I can't believe someone
suggest
has.
the title?
You can. Yeah.
Is it Sleeping with the Enemy?
It is Sleeping with the Enemy.
Oh, get it.
Well, point for you. Really annoyingly, a point for Mr. Scoones, who has taken a linguistic rapier to my to my what I thought was foolproof question setting.
Yeah.
And
it's a battle of wits, Ian, and so nice of you to come unarmed.
Well, away I shall slink to return next time.
Yes.
Well done,
Paul. It sounds as though you're not going to be tossed into the time lash.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to it.
You've escaped a tinselly fate.
Oh. Better luck next time.
Yes, you never know. Enemy of the World. It's another absolute doozy. What's your relationship with this story, Paul? Would you have read the Target novel, or how did you first come across this story?
Oh, it would have been the Target novel. I think that I started collecting the Target books around the time this came out, because it's about 1981, isn't it? When it's 81, I have a feeling it was the
Well, Ian would know, because he did the novelisation for that one, didn't you?
Yes,
Mr.
I did.
Martyr.
Yes, I did, yes.
Yeah.
Ian Martin, yeah.
So yes, it would have definitely been the novelisation. So, and it was a time too when there was only a handful of Troughton novels. So I think that, given that my entire understanding of the Troughton, because I didn't see any, I was not old enough to have seen any of the Troughton stories on television.
No.
I would have my entire memory of, my entire impression, I should say, of Troughton stories was reading the books. So I would have been familiar only with the stories that have been novelised. So Enemy of the World, although it's not a very common Troughton story, it's certainly one I would have thought of it as, this is what the Troughton era is like. It gives you a very skewed perspective, I guess, on the era. Would that be the same for you?
I was awful about the targets. I only had maybe half a dozen, which I reread numerous times, but I wasn't the sort of avid collector. I probably spent more time looking at the program guide, just like the little synopses, and I'd flick through those to get an idea of what the stories were all about.
Sure.
So the first time I really experienced a story would have been the audio, which a friend lent me a disc with a load of audios on. So that would have been the first time I experienced it.
I mean, then obviously, I don't think I listened to the audio, but so I think my next exposure to it would have been the Troughton years VHS, maybe.
Okay.
I might have seen a very ropey off-air, a pirated copy of it, because I was borrowing. I got to a point where I had a friend at university who had an enormous store of VHS tapes. This is pre BBC releasing them, so he'd got them from friends in the UK copied. So they'd filtered found the fan network, and they were very fuzzy, if you know what I mean. I'm sure as everyone was seeing them, so you had to watch them for a snowstorm to make out. And then obviously when the Troughton
that just adds to the mystery, doesn't it?
It does. It makes them that much more intriguing. And then when the Troughton years came out, I would have watched that one episode numerous times. But again, just like with the Troughton book, it gives you a very skewed perspective, because I think what we realise now is it's not a very typical. It doesn't give you a very good indication of what the story's like.
Well, no, certainly watching season 5 in order, it is quite a stark standout from the rest of the stories we've seen thus far.
Yes, but I mean, I have to say, I'm kind of in all of Doctor Who. I'm kind of drawn to the stories that stand out as unusual. I mean, I'm a huge fan, for instance, of Warrior's Gate, and that's not very typical Doctor Who. You know, I like the ones which dare to do something different, to break out of the usual format.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, Base Under Siege is thought of as a sort of a classic genre within Doctor Who, but I have to say, having watched these stories before, the thought of watching, half a dozen Base Under Sieges in a row could get a tad tiresome. So just having this to break things up a bit in the middle of the season, I think, is a nice, refreshing change.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's kind of it is and it isn't the same as the rest of season 5, because to my mind, it's what would happen if the monsters didn't show up.
Yeah.
It's still got a confined number of sets, and it's still got humans very much in conflict with each other and arguing most of the time and backstabbing each other, which happens in a lot of the other season 5 stories. But in this, the big difference with this one is that they're just simply there's no monsters. They're not there. So it's almost positing the question, okay, now you've got used to this format that we keep delivering to you every week of here's the humans in conflict with each other, here's the monsters that come along, how do they deal with that, here's how do the humans react to each other when the monsters never show up.
Yeah. And also I feel like there's more of a sense of scale in this particular story, because you start off in Australia and then they're off to Hungary and...
It's a very false scale, though, isn't it? Because from a visual perspective...
It's scale on a Doctor Who budget.
It's a series of rooms with a lot of people talking about how they've travelled, but not actually getting a sense of it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that said, I mean, I can't imagine how much of the budget they blew on the helicopter stuff at the very start. And the hovercraft as well. It's very high-tech.
To my mind, it's the beginning of that sort of obsession in Doctor Who with using helicopters and hovercraft, isn't it?
Yes. If only there was some sort of link between this story and that sort of that sort of Pertwee era where they essentially, oh wait, hang on a minute, who's this? the director's Barry Letts.
Yeah. And video phones as well.
Yes.
That's the other thing that all of this stuff, which is all, relatively new technology. I mean, helicopters have been around for a while, obviously, but hovercraft was certainly very new. Video phones were the stuff of the future. And it was like sort of, hey, let's talk about this, and also there's all these references in the dialogue to traveling by rocket and traveling by hovercar, which you never ever see because obviously, like you say, the budget's already blown. So,
We've also got another, well, not quite a staple of the Barry Letts production era, but there's the scene where they're in the park. And instead of having the location, you've got a projected background, which is not quite CSO, but
you can see he's going on the same principles. It's the same reasoning that, hey, let's not bother going on location. Let's just throw a background up.
I think he does a really good job on the direction on this. Yeah,
he was quite down on it, wasn't it? He didn't think he'd done very well with it in interviews.
I think whenever you saw him being interviewed, he always seemed like a very sort of self-deprecating sort of person.
Sure.
And I think he probably would have been the last one to have been crowing about what a great job he'd done. But I think he's done a fantastic job on it.
Yeah. Did I can't remember when did Barry Letts die? Was it before or after this was returned?
I've got a feeling it was before.
Right. So what I guess where I'm going with this is he never got a chance to reevaluate it.
No, which is a shame.
Right.
He died in 2009.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that's a shame. Obviously, for a lot of people who were collecting the DVDs, the Lost in Time set would have been possibly their first chance to have seen the Orphaned episode.
Yeah.
Did you have that one, Iain, or was that not part of your collection?
No, I didn't. I didn't want to experience bits of stories because I like stories, and that would have frustrated the hell out of me.
My wife did find it very strange that I wanted to buy this set with just random episodes on.
It is a very, it's understandable if you're a completist, but I have always come at it from kind of story first. And the Troughton era was probably the least represented in my Target collection. I probably had about 6 or 7 Troughtons in total, and I never wanted to read this one. I saw it in the library, I saw it in shops. It was slightly too thick for me. When it came to Target books, I like to get through them in about an hour, so anything that was over 120 pages was, really not the done thing.
I haven't opened up the book in a while, but my memory of it is that the text size was smaller than some of the other Target books. Right. So that would have been off-putting to me as a young kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I was a kid, I found Ian Marter's prose kind of, I'm going to say heavy going, bearing in mind it's a Doctor Who novelisation. And he's not Salman Rushdie, but, at the time it was a bit much. So the first time I saw this was when it was released. I was in Frankfurt in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. So obviously we can't really talk about the release of this without perhaps dipping into the Omni rumour and all of that business. Now, obviously, Paul, we're not asking you to give away any insider stuff because you are obviously involved in the DVD and Blu-ray range. Were you... Obviously, you must have been aware of this whole Omni rumour thing going on. Were you actively kind of listening out for whispers on the grapevine on this, or what was your take on the whole thing?
I knew before it was announced, because obviously I knew people who were working on the restoration of it, but I was sworn to secrecy. But it took me, when I was told, it took me by surprise. I had no inkling that the news was coming. And I think by this point too, I'd weaned myself off the forums, so I wasn't really keeping up with the fan gossip. I mean, one thing that I found with working professionally on Doctor Who, which I started doing from about 2008 onwards, is that I found it very hard to separate my fan involvement from my professional involvement. So I just got to a point
to step away.
To step away from the fan side of things. So I didn't engage on club forums anymore. Partly because I didn't want to see criticisms of my work or my colleagues. I didn't want to fall into the trap of someone reading into something I'd posted and going, "Oh, is Paul talking about something he's working on?" and that sort of thing. So it just became too difficult. So to cut a long story short, by the time that the so-called Omni rumor came out and the announcement of these, I really wasn't involved in online fandom very much anymore. So
you probably save yourself an awful lot of grief because
I'm on Twitter and Facebook, so I see the sort of the fallout from that. I see people grumbling about what they're seeing on the forums, even though I'm not going on there to see it. So I get a sense of just how much agony people are going through over these, tying themselves in knots over these potential rumours and potential fines and everything. But I'm just kind of... It fills me with a sense of relief that I'm not part of that community, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you did dodge a bullet there because it just, at one point, I got toxic. Completely sucked into it.
I think toxic is the word.
Yeah, I've never really been one for forums to a great degree. I did used to help out on a very small forum, which was great fun, run by some really nice people, and the people who were interacting with you were... all very,
don't get me wrong. I used to be a very active participant in fandom, and I ran the New Zealand Doctor Who fan club for many years and published a fanzine. So I'm not knocking fandom in any sense. I just found the two parts of my life very difficult to keep separate. So I kind of made the decision to.
So we're talking about the Omni rumor and the missing episodes, and I've got to say that's a whole area that's never really had any interest for me. Like, these stories I tend to think of as being, they're not my era, so I'm less invested in them. And, if 1/4 of a story that isn't very good turns up, I'm not going to get that excited about it. That said, the absolute nanosecond that Enemy of the World went on sale on iTunes, I was there. I was hitting download. So what do I know? Yeah.
Is that because it was a complete story rather than an orphaned episode, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely wouldn't have... I'm gonna make this claim, and then 4 missing episodes are going to turn up, and we're going to be put to the test.
You'll have to sit there and not watch them.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. Yeah. We've both sort of talked about missing episodes. Mark, what's your whole relationship with that?
I've always been a bit obsessed with them, to be honest. I think I either would have been the Jean-Marc Lefessier program guide, or possibly Haining's Key to Time, where I first realised there were missing episodes. And I think from that point on, you always want what you haven't got, don't you? Now, luckily, we've got the audio recordings.
I remember Terence Dix's Making of Doctor Who book, the Target one.
Oh, yes.
And there's a chapter in the back going, after the stories are screened, they're wiped, but don't worry, they're all being novelised. That's just like one line in the book, and you kind of go, and you just kind of think, oh, the stories they're not saved, and that had a huge impact on me as a young fan, being very impressionable, going, oh, the Target book's the important thing, not the television stories.
Yeah,
because that's kind of what Terence was saying in the book, which is weird. But
well, it's not weird when you think he alone got all the money from all the Target books.
Well,
so he's got an interest in that.
Don't worry, kids, buy my books.
Yeah,
and we did.
Yeah. So yes. I mean, I didn't really have an interest in missing episodes, other than obviously wanting to see all of Doctor Who. So there was that.
Yeah.
But obviously, then I had the personal stake in it after finding one, and that sort of going, oh, maybe this is something I should be paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I imagine finding one must be the closest a human being can ever get to being Charlie Bucket from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and finding a golden ticket,
Yeah. I don't know Philip Morris at all. I've never had any interaction with him. But I do kind of feel sorry for him in a way, because I kind of think that could so easily have been me, all that sort of speculation about what he might or might not have, or what he's up to, all that sort of thing. And I just think, this is just another reason to stay away from the forums.
Obviously, it's a wonderful thing that he's done to return those stories, but yeah, if he's still actively, well, I don't know, it's 10 years on now from when we had them back. If he's still actively looking, it must be a very tricky thing to try and navigate when you've got people trying to second guess you the whole time.
Yeah. I think if I'll hand on heart, I'm not looking, but if I was, I wouldn't be saying anything.
Still, we have to be very thankful we've got the ones we did. I think this is an absolute cracker of a story.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm just, you guys were talking about getting it on day one when it released on iTunes, and I can just remember watching that first episode and seeing the TARDIS materialise on a beach in Australia, of all places.
I'm in the
fantastic.
Australasian zone. I'm speaking to you from the Australasian zone.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, here's a question. What zone are we in, given Brexit? We're not part of the Central European zone, are we?
Gosh. But you would have been in 2018, though.
Well, I mean, yeah, we'd already voted to leave, but procedurally...
I think we're, at the moment, we seem to be in the fecal zone.
Yeah, we'd be in some little irrelevant zone that has no real trading relationships with any of the zones.
No.
Yeah.
But don't let me sidetrack this and drag it down a political cul-de-sac and start beating my drum.
It is kind of weird to be, to see, this is Australia, but it's very obviously a cold beach in England. Maybe that's more obvious to me. I'm not Australian, obviously. I'm in New Zealand, but I know what an Australian beach looks like.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sure the budget would have stretched to flying out to Australia, but they probably wouldn't have been able to do that back projection on the parks.
Yeah,
so,
it was the cloth or the trip to Australia.
Yeah.
Barry could have done an Australian beach as a back projection as well.
Oh,
could have had that.
He could have.
So, what did we all make of episode 1? Because I think episode 1 is kind of a separate beast from the rest of the serial. So, I mean, there are people who absolutely love it, and there are people who think it's the most kind of egregious bit of padding perhaps in the Troughton era. What do we have here? What do you guys think?
I remember the first time I watched it, I was kind of, the thing that struck me the most is all the stuff you're getting from Troughton, and I'm thinking particularly of his antics, on the beach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We just didn't know about that.
That's it.
I don't think it's particular from memory, and I'd have to go back and look, but I don't think it's that sequence is particularly well represented in the telesnaps, and I certainly didn't pick that up from the audio. Just all of his sort of stripping off to his long johns and going and
capering about
and dancing a jig in the surf. It just that was a revelation to me. I was just sort of delighted that, and it struck home to me. How much are we missing from the stories we don't have?
Exactly, yeah. He's such a physical actor as well. Yeah,
that one sequence really drove that home to me. That to me was the thing that stuck with me for the whole story, really, was what we're getting from this returned episode is just so much of Troughton's physicality that we weren't aware of.
So here's a thought experiment for you. Can you suggest or imagine any other Doctor behaving like that?
Possibly Matt Smith.
Oh, yeah. You've got me there. Yeah, actually, you're right.
Shout.
But you're
maybe
right. It's not really. At a pinch, maybe McCoy.
Maybe McCoy in season 24 before Andrew Cartmel joins. For me, it's an example of Patrick Troughton rather than the second Doctor, and it's always. Kind of, I've always bumped on the idea that the Doctor would ever behave like that. I mean, he's the second Doctor is a fun, impish clown, sure, but that is the behaviour of a fool.
Yeah, I'd go to the extent to suggest that the entire story is indulging its star. It's giving Troughton something different to do to keep him interested and occupied and playing the role. So he's getting to play around and do something silly, but he's also getting to play another character as well. It's a gift to the star, I think. The whole story. That's my impression.
To be fair, he's just had to do the Ice Warriors, so he probably would want something to be a bit more exciting.
Yeah. So I think
Sorry, Ice Warriors fans.
So I don't know how much of this. I know that that Barry Letts rejigged all the film sequences. We know that from the documentation. So I don't know quite how much are David Whitaker's original intention, because I think it was meant to be a seaside resort, a fun fair or something originally. That was the original.
Okay.
The original script had that rather than what we got. And it was, I think the reason for changing it was simply if you have a deserted beach, then your extras budget is not a problem, because you're not having to sort of employ all these people to be holiday makers. But yes, because the sequence has been rejigged, I wonder if maybe Barry Letts, as a first-time director, was that Troughton had his ear in a sense of like, oh, I'd like to do this, and so Barry's saying, oh, okay, if that's what you'd like to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we really are getting exactly what Troughton would like to do in the film sequences. That's my impression.
Well, I'm going to put my cards on the table. I love episode 1. I think it's great.
Mm.
But it might well be padding. I'm not going to deny that, but it's entertaining padding.
But that is Troughton's Doctor. He has always got that element of silliness, tempered by sort of intelligence and wit and all the rest of it. I mean, even when you see him in the Five Doctors, he's prattling along about all these irrelevant things. It's just part of his character.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not going to get into a bitter war of words with either of you. I like it less. It kind of, to me, you just think, are you a 300-400-year-old Time Lord who's very knowledgeable and clever about things? I mean, Pertwee wouldn't have done that. Tom Baker wouldn't have done
bad back,
Colin Baker
can't
wouldn't
go
have
jumping
done
around
that.
in the surf.
Well, no. He'd have found an ice cream vendor, probably. I think each Doctor would have found some aspect of beachness, and it would have worked for them. McCoy probably would have done some business changing behind a towel, in a magic way. Colin Baker probably ill-advised speedos. Tom Baker would have woven a deck chair out of his scarf and 2 bits of wood. I don't know. Everyone would have done something different with that.
Well, we saw Tom Baker on a beach, so we know what happens when Tom Baker's on a beach.
but that he was asleep. That's not fair. What no one knows, they spent about 4 hours filming all kinds of giddy hijinks, and then Tom has a little nap, and that's the 2 minutes they film. I mean, such bad luck.
I mean, it felt like 4 hours because that was a very long pan across that beach, wasn't it?
Well, it's K9 that goes for the swim rather than the Doctor, isn't it?
Yes. I think the cast is fantastic in this one. Bill Kerr, who was well known to UK viewers at the time because he was a regular in the Hancock's Half Hour.
Was he a TV regular or was he only a radio regular? I know he was on the radio. He was in my favourite Hancock, the television set. I think he was in that one, which was where I knew him from.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not overlook the top billed star, which is Mary Peach.
Of course, yes.
I mean, that's unusual, I think, for Doctor Who, is to have a female in the top bill.
Mm-hmm.
We've
got 2 very strong female characters in this one.
Definitely.
Which is very progressive for its time.
And as you may know, she'd recently auditioned as Emma Peel's replacement.
Oh, wow. Right.
So
I was not aware of that.
It's a similar role for her.
Yeah. Oh, how fascinating! I was going to say it's.
And were you also aware that such was her star power that it was a condition of her accepting the role that they rewrote the script to give her a larger part.
Oh, wow.
Excellent.
In
good
other
on her.
words, her agent said, unless you beef up her role, she's not going to accept. So Barry Letts had to go back to the producer and script editor and go, we need to improve these episodes for her, because Astrid only originally appeared in the first 4 episodes of Enemy of the World, so she's not in the final 2 were rewritten to give her something to do, and that was the way they got her to sign up to it.
Oh, I'm glad they did in the end, because I think she's great in this.
I might sound terribly knowledgeable, but I have to admit that when I rewatched this yesterday, I did have the info text on. So.
They are invaluable, aren't they?
Tapping my cap to my colleague Martin Wiggins here, who wrote a superb set of info texts for this.
Thank you, Martin.
Yep, well done. Because it's not a story I've worked on, so I'm not terribly familiar with it in terms from a production perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's a side note, but I think the more I know about Doctor Who, the less I know, because the stories that I've worked on in terms of writing the info text, I've discovered stuff I didn't know. I've discovered stuff that's completely wrong in terms of what we thought we knew, and so it makes me doubt every other story that I haven't worked on. So when I look at you say, I want you to come on and talk about Enemy of the World, my first reaction is, oh heck, it's not one I've worked on. So my gut reaction was, well, okay, I'll see what Martin's found out about it. So that's where.
But this way, we get to hear your opinion, as a pure fan rather than someone,
absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah.
But I don't want to be spreading incorrect information more than that.
Oh, that's what we're here for, love. It's all about lies.
Absolutely, yeah, that's our MO.
Chicanery and nonsense. I've never even watched Doctor Who. Oh.
I should say I'm working on a set of info texts right now at the moment, which I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but it's going to blow a lot of preconceptions of how the story was made out of the water, because all the reference books get it wrong.
Oh, that is interesting.
And I've run it past my colleagues, and they've gone, "Oh heck, you're absolutely right," because we've only recently got access to the production documentation, and it overturns what all the books have said. So things like the Television Companion, the 70s, even the complete history, Andrew Pixie's archive, they're all wrong. So I'm kind of going, okay, this makes me really doubt all the ones where we haven't looked in this level of detail yet.
Well,
So,
that's an intriguing and fascinating thing, and now I'm going to spend probably the next half an hour thinking about what story it might be. So
I'll tell you that I'm working a few ahead of where we're up to in the release schedule, so it's not necessarily the next one that'll come up.
You tease, Paul.
That's as much as I can say. This is why I don't go on the forums.
It's all right. We're not going to grill you for more information.
Fair enough. Not on here anyway.
No. Also in the cast, we've got Colin Douglas, who makes an appearance in one of my all-time favourite stories. He's also known as Reuben from The Horror of Fang Rock.
Reuben the Root.
He plays
and
Donald Bruce.
And the bus driver from GBH, which was my first exposure to him. Yeah.
He spent some time living in New Zealand, just to give you that.
Did he really? Well, it's a small world.
As a teenager, he's from Newcastle, but he moved to New Zealand as a teenager.
Wow. So what do we think of him in this one? Because I'm just going to upset you both.
Oh.
I don't think he's a standout character in it, but he's playing it. There's not really anything. I wouldn't criticise his performance. I just think he's just a very sort of. There's not a lot of meat to his character, I think, personally.
Mm-hmm. So is this going to consist of me reading out the cast and Iain just saying, well, they're rubbish. If you have a go at Carmen Munro, then we are going to get into a fist fight.
Mate,
Totally.
I am holding everything in for Carmen Munro. Don't worry about that.
Oh, she's so good. So good.
She's so good. I feel like he's one of those actors who's always really reliably, dependably brilliant in any role. But in this, I just felt he was not exactly tripping over the lines, but just kind of getting them out and not really understanding what he was saying. And I mean, you know, it's that old thing of obviously when they were producing this story, they couldn't have known what the future would look like and how people would look, and we'll come to Bennett soon. But he just he just didn't evoke the kind of sinister presence that he was meant to. He just looked too much like the school caretaker to be the second most important man on the world.
Can I quote from Martin's info text here about Colin Douglas? Here's a direct quote from one of the lines of info text. He remarked at the time that it was the worst thing he'd ever done, and he didn't want to be asked to do another Doctor Who. The very next thing that appears on screen, he later played a possessed lighthouse keeper in Doctor Who.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So maybe he did, if he thought the material was, I don't want
He's
to
not
say,
invested in
I
it,
don't want to
is
say
he?
beneath him, but there is some degree of remove between where he needed to be and where he was.
Totally agree.
Yeah, let's sashay merrily through the cast. Mark, who's next on your radar?
Oh, for me, it's got to be Milton Johns as Bennett. I think he is so perfect at playing the characters that you just love to hate. He's such a little weasel.
Yeah, you get the sense from the script that Bennett isn't meant to be as prominent as he is, but he just eats it up whenever he's on screen. He's just
you can't take your eyes off him, and that's just the hair and the ridiculous costume. What's going on there?
If you're bringing it up, that hair, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So it looks terrible in episode 1 and then manages to look progressively worse as the story continues. And I wonder if he thought to himself, how can I steal the scene in this story? How can I stand out when I'm in the same story as Carmen Munro? How do I get the viewer to remember me above all else? I know. I'll go to my barbers, I'll get them drunk, then I'll get them stoned, then I'll sit upside down and say, give me a mullet. What was happening on his head?
Wondered if it might, it's so outrageous, I wondered if it might have been a wig.
I think it was probably two wigs stapled together. I mean, it was just, it's not a style. You don't see other people. You don't see a bunch of actors from the 60s having that hairdo turning up in a bunch of different shows. It's just, my God, that hair.
Look, I've seen enough episodes of Neighbours and The Flying Doctors to know that the mullet is quite popular in Australasia.
The mullet alone wouldn't have been a problem. It was the mullet with that sort of fringe that had been sort of chopped into. And he's got a curiously shaped head to start with, so it just is using your hair as an offensive weapon ought to be some kind of war crime.
Yeah,
but I think it works. It works for his character.
Yeah,
it absolutely does.
Because he's just so, awful. To have such an appearance, I think really works for him.
He is always one of those. He's not always one of those. He always gets those kind of parts where you have to despise him, and I couldn't tell you any, but as a kid growing up in the 80s, I want to, I feel like he was always on TV and I was always cross with him about something. But this is, I'm going to say, easily his most kind of scene-stealing performance because normally in subsequent stories that have the gift of Milton Johns, he's in a smaller cast, he's in a bigger role. It's less of an achievement to dominate the proceedings, but in this, when he's up against an awful lot of other people, to really come away from this as the one you remember, I think it's an extraordinary piece of work.
Yeah, he's just. I think he's the standout cast member, to be honest, for me. Because, not because you like him in any sense, quite the opposite, but he's just doing such a good job of portraying this utterly despicable, utterly evil person. It just, every time I've watched Enemy of the World, I've been drawn to his performance. It's just so...
He's got a delicious camp sort of twist, which probably is part of his toolkit. I'm pretty sure he's done similar things in other stories as well. But there's a wonderful kind of black humour in that kind of dismissive camp thing he does. I think he's extraordinary, and probably just. He went to the hairdresser and say, make me look faintly insecty because I'm playing a sort of human cockroach, as I, Milton Johns, am wont to do.
I think he's magic. I think, like you say, whenever he's on the screen, he just steals every moment. And talking of people who you can't take your eyes off when they're on the screen, we have to talk about the lovely Carmen Munro.
So, best person in Doctor Who ever.
Yeah, I don't think you get too many arguments on that score.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, okay, that's the end of the conversation. Thanks both so much.
Well, I mean, after a scene with her in it, anything else we could go on to talk about would just be a footnote. So, let's just give her 10 out of 10 and wrap it up.
Yeah. I mean, she does an awful lot with not a particularly massive part, and she just absolutely knocks it out of the park.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, go on is the wrong word, but a lot of people talk about Mary Peach. She's fine, sure, but it's all about Freya for me. Not. Why have they both got such similar names? They get two women. They get two brilliant actors in this. And one's called Faria and one's called Freya, and it's a bit like, could you not have? Oh, even on the rare occasions when you get females to be in Doctor Who and you give them strong roles, and one of them's even a person of colour in the 60s, you still manage to cock it up by giving them essentially the same name so that people can't remember them as clearly as they would like to.
The only saving grace with that is that they barely mention Astrid's surname in the course of the story. I mean, she's almost always just referred to as Astrid. But you make a good point.
It's a little thing, but But yeah, she was stellar, and obviously leaping ahead when she bites the bullet at the end. Well, not even at the end. Was it part 4? I'd have to look at my notes, and I'm not that kind of dedicated professional. I would have just probably drawn a little sad face. So anyway,
it is episode 4.
Yeah, but I was really upset about that. Really, why did they have to do that? I mean, I know that's how storytelling works, but good Lord. Good Lord.
Well, we don't know what Astrid's fate would have originally been, but we would have been bemoaning that both of them would have left in that episode if Mary Peach's agent hadn't put his foot down, because they were both going to be written out in episode 4.
So if Carmen had had a better agent, she could have carried on to episode 6 as well. Oh.
Correct. Astrid could have been the one who got gunned down, and Faria could have been the one that lived to the end.
I want to live in that universe.
Yeah.
In fact, there must be a universe where she became a companion. That's the universe I want to live in.
Oh my giddy arm! Can you imagine?
I'm going to break through into the multiverse, and I'm going to pick that universe. And and she'd still be in it now, and she'd still be absolutely amazing. What did we think of the Formula One driver Fernando Alonso as Salamander?
What is that accent?
It's different. It's definitely different.
It's sort of, I want to say Spexican.
Yeah. I've always wanted to meet a Doctor Who fan from Mexico and see what their take on that accent is, because I'm pretty certain they wouldn't recognise it as something from their culture.
Well, I'm sure if there's anyone from Yucatan, which I think was where they said he was from, they're bound to recognise it straight away.
He was certainly born near the Yucatan Peninsula, yeah. It's, I mean, you know, again, in the 60s, who would have known that wasn't a very authentic accent, you know? But yeah, it was quite a thing. It was quite a tour de force. I think it's probably my favourite Troughton performance outside of the War Games.
And are you saying specifically Salamander or the Doctor? Or
specifically Salamander. I think it's really good to see him getting his teeth into something meaty, because I think his instinct, as we were talking about earlier with the beach sequences, his instinct is to be fun and frivolous and frothy. But I think it's when he gets to do something with real heft that you get to see that kind of flinty power that he has, that steel. I think he's absolutely
There's a lot going on in that performance as well, because he's having to be the Doctor and Salamander, and the Doctor pretending to be Salamander, and it's a very
and Salamander pretending to be the Doctor as well. You've got four performances in that story.
What a tangled web!
Yeah.
And it all rests on that believability. I think he absolutely knocks it out of the park. I think he does a great job with it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that scene, isn't it, in episode 5 where you're not quite sure if he's Salamander or the Doctor, and even Jamie and Victoria aren't sure.
Yeah,
that was quite a powerful scene, I think. And he's just absolutely playing it. He's playing the Doctor, but playing it so convincingly as Salamander that even his own companions can't recognise him. And then gradually he comes out of that performance and just very so subtly switches into being the Doctor. And
it's a very smooth transition, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's just a beautiful scene.
I've got to say, I'm a little bit surprised to hear all this, because after episode 4, I sort of stopped noticing that people like Troughton and Mary Peach are even in this, because once it becomes the Colin show, who's got bandwidth to notice anyone else?
What is he doing?
What program has he been told he's appearing in?
What's he taking, and can we have some?
Yes, that is one hell of a plot twist, isn't it?
I mean, it's unnecessary. You don't see it coming. It adds a whole, completely further dimension to what's already, I would say, a very good story with plenty going on, and it could have continued doing what it was doing quite happily. But then, you've got this kind of silo. They should make a TV show called Silo.
What a good idea.
Yeah, that would be good. They've got this silo underground, and by the way, the shot of Salamander's little sort of personal rocket thing flying down into that.
Oh, how cool
That's
is that?
Incredible. That's really good. I'm assuming that was taken from, a movie or something.
No, they actually shot it.
No, it's all done.
So could they not have just reused that shot over and over again to show people travelling from Hungary to Australasia and what have you?
Well,
because
you'd think that, wouldn't you?
That was an absolute,
bit of an oversight.
That was so good.
I must say, the first time I watched this, when it downloaded via iTunes, for a short while, I thought Colin was played by Richard Franklin.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. There's something that, he's very he's really trying.
It's very Colin-y.
He's really trying. He really wants to. He wants you to believe in this guy who's absolutely gagging to see the surface, and the level of passion and intensity he brings to that. I mean, I seem to remember a couple of months ago. The last time I saw this story, I actually Googled the actor and tried to see what else he'd done, and I couldn't find too much. But I feel like there was a role out there for him.
Yeah, I wondered if, if he'd wandered into the wrong studio and he's actually from a completely different program, because his performance is just so out of keeping with everyone else around him. He's just...
It's really
such a
is.
bizarre performance.
It is. It's so strange.
He's meant to be in Studio C and something completely different, and he's just gone onto the wrong set.
I mean, again, this, and this might just be because it was Barry Lett's first time as a director, but if it was me, I'd have put an arm round him and said, "We're going to go again, love, and this time I want you to be a little bit less, just be a bit more, And I think with those
naturalistic,
I think with those notes, he'd have got it. Be a bit more like Colin Douglas. Just don't give so much of a shit.
But
take the money at the end of the day.
But having given that performance in his first scene, he commits to it.
He really does. He doubles down.
Every other Colin scene, he's still giving that same performance. You've got to admire his passion and commitment.
Did he get a scene with Milton Johns? He didn't, did he?
No.
What a thing that would have been. What a duel of the fates, if you will. It would have been like when Vader meets Obi-Wan at the end of Star Wars, It's like, oh.
What we're saying is there should be a season 5B where the Doctor and Faria come up against Bennick and Colin.
Someone
punch up at the end.
Someone from Big Finish is listening to this and taking notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine we get to see some sort of face-off betwixt Colin and Milton. Who's coming out on top? Who's winning the day in that
Bennick
scene?
every time.
You think?
Come on. Yeah.
You think the duplicitous and shifty Bennick would run rings around the honest and upstanding Colin? Actually, there's a bit where you can almost... Never mind. Very tight bodysuits they were wearing down there. Very, very, very fitting garments. Very snug. Yeah.
Okay, let's move the conversation on.
Coming back to that left descent that we were talking about.
Yes.
That's like the beach sequence. That's another thing that struck me when watching it, is that we just wouldn't have got an appreciation of just how good that looks when we would just had the audio. So that's the other example of something that we've really gained from getting the actual episodes back, because we're getting to see this wonderful piece of effects shot, which, like you say, you was convinced came from another program that's so good, and yet it's we just all if you just listen to the audio, you just sort of clunk and whir and no appreciation of just what was happening in that scene.
And without wishing to spoil ourselves too much for next season, I do wonder if something like the Space Pirates could be a revelation if we got some episodes back because of the
I was talking to Paul while you were off air, and I was saying probably an episode of something will turn up pretty soon, and then we'll have to start this whole podcast all over again. And we'll have to see whether I'm there downloading it as soon as I possibly can, despite my affected insouciance when it comes to missing episodes, whether I'm actually going to be straight in there. So Space Pirates 5, I'd guess. Yeah.
It's unfortunate for something like Space Pirates that it is such a visual story that it is one of the missing ones, because it's just like there's so much we're not seeing. I mean, obviously we're not seeing, but you know what I mean. It's not a dialogue heavy story. It's very much rests on its visuals, and the visuals aren't there.
Yeah, it could be as good as one of those kind of Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers serials from the 40s, It's that kind of vibe. It's sets and action rather than dialogue. So when I was reading the Terrance Dicks novel, and there was a book you can read in under 40 minutes, that was what was going on in my head. It looked brilliant.
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed. Is it me, or in this story, does the Doctor take an awful lot of convincing before he actually decides to get involved and try and take down Salamander?
I have a theory around this. I think we've got to think of the writer here. It's David Whitaker and his touchstone is the Hartnell era, because that's where he was scripted. So that's his understanding of Doctor Who. And it would be consistent for Hartnell's Doctor to spend a lot of time discerning what was going on and before, and being reluctant to act, whereas Troughton's someone much more who would just jump in and get involved. So I think almost Whitaker's writing him as Hartnell in a sense like that. That it's that sort of we shouldn't interfere thing.
I think that is a very good theory. I think you're right on the money there.
I don't know, I feel like it's a very early story from Trial of a Time Lord, and it all hinges on the Doctor being required to act, and that's the nub of his defence, but it takes a long time to build up to that.
From a logistical perspective too, I think they want to keep Troughton out of the action, because otherwise you've got the problem of him running into Salamander much earlier than he does. So his reluctance to act means that he hides in a caravan, or he's off doing something else. He's not he's not instantly going, because otherwise you go, why is he not going to Salamander's villa and confronting him in episode 2?
Oh, while you're mentioning the caravan, another bit of the budget there being spent on a set. Although we didn't have any monsters in this story, there was a frankly distressing scene with some plates being smashed.
Yes.
That was so brutal, wasn't it? That's the most evil thing I've ever seen in Doctor Who.
The crockery budget was blown out, wasn't it?
You know they're bad when they go around smashing up plates for no good reason.
What you don't know is that Milton Johns actually had to provide all his own crockery, because he blew the BBC's crockery budget in the first take, muffed his line, and then had to go again. So he brought all his mum's fine porcelain and had to just whack it to pieces.
Did you know that he was actually of Greek descent, and that was how he got the role?
Oh.
Yeah, because they're very fond of smashing plates at the end of a meal, aren't they?
That's isn't it? Isn't that a wedding thing?
Yeah.
So did he get married? Perhaps the producer of the show went to his wedding and saw him and thought, yeah, he'd be good. That's the sort of thing that happens all the time.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that was a shocking scene. Surprised it didn't get a 15 rating on the...
That's the sort of thing that should have been one of those little Australian censor clips, because they just can't show something that brutal.
Yeah, it's just too distressing, yeah.
It really, we're used to people being stunned and shot and gassed and, dangled over things and electrocuted, but smashing a man's crockery, good Lord, is there no humanity?
A man's caravan is his castle. You can't just walk in and start smashing up the crockery.
I thought Butland's security was better than that, I've got to say. I'll be going elsewhere from now on.
Yeah.
You've got to admit it's a very sophisticated caravan, though, because it has the function of when someone passes through it wearing a helmet, their helmet changes colour.
I must admit, I've seen it so many times, I'd never noticed that.
Well, the guard that confronts Astrid and then chases her when she leads the caravan, he's got a black helmet when he's inside the caravan, and it's white when he's outside. So the moment he leaves the caravan, so I think there's a field around the caravan door that just changes the colour of the helmet.
or it's a sort of global hypercolour helmet, and it reacts to the ambient temperature, and when he goes out in the sun. With that. Yeah,
it's reacting to Salamander's sun store in orbit, isn't it? That's what
yeah.
There we go. There's an answer to everything.
Are you're wearing my black helmet from the 1999 Monaco Grand Prix? I wear this when I win in America.
I had no idea that Papa Lazari was in this.
It wasn't.
Episode.
It was the dad. It was the dad in League of Gentlemen. The Greek dad. Oh my boys, you are a Mary Queen. Yeah, that's. So if Fernando Alonso's listening, he's probably going to sue me now. So thanks, thanks guys.
The views of Iain Martin are not the views of this podcast.
Ian Martyr.
Oh yeah,
I think you'll find I'm called Ian Martyr if you are a lawyer or any sort of practicing attorney.
Do you have anything else we want to get off our chest about this?
There's a lot of rubber gimp costumes in this story.
Well, I mean, how do I?
Is that code for futuristic, or is that code for villain? Having that sort of skin tight black rubber outfit.
It's the future, Ian.
Is
Everyone's
it?
wearing
So
it.
you got Federin, who is clearly not evil. Jamie wears it for a bit. Obviously, Bennick's in and out of that when no one's looking, like you wouldn't believe. It's a fascinating story because as we've sort of mentioned, you've got these what presumably would have been a very expensive effects shot of that capsule going down into the silo. You've got the rear projection, so there's a lot of innovation. There's money spent on things like the helicopter. And then you've got kind of cheap things like the caravan. You've got Milton John's hair. You've got brilliance. You've got unbelievably awfulness. It's just such a real hodgepodge of a story. It doesn't.
It's got it all.
It has got it all. That is what I'm trying to say. It's got a little bit of everything from all ends of the spectrum.
Do you think that it's an odd story in that, particularly in the first few episodes, it keeps sort of twisting and turning, and you can't sort of quite pin it down?
I was thinking it reminded me of, was it Evil of the Daleks, where it's sort of 2 episodes of this, and then it's 2 episodes of that, and then we go over here, and it's 2 episodes of this. Mm-hmm. Because you've got sort of parts 5 and 6 is kind of silo based and more about what Salamander's really up to. Episode 1, I think, is really there just to kind of delay things for 25 minutes. Yeah. And the early part of the story, sort of episodes 2 and 3, is all about this kind of quasi Shakespearean. We've got 2 people who look the same. Let's have a bit of fun with that. And Jamie,
a lot of episode 3 is about the kitchen and the security vestibule.
Yeah, I thought we'd be the only podcast to get away with not mentioning that, but I mean, yeah. So cells traditionally have always had 4 walls and a door because it's very difficult for a prisoner to escape from that kind of setup. Where I feel they've made an error with this whole corridor approach is you've got 2 ends to that bad boy through which anyone could run, and you've got nothing. It's such a rookie error, and it undermines the capability of this global menace. If they can't even lock someone up properly, are they that scary? Discuss.
There's a line in the script that would have helped that scene that they didn't use, where one of the characters explains that all the other rooms and have got windows that he could have escaped out of, and that's why they've chosen to put him there.
I mean, buy some bars. Do you know what I mean?
Quite.
No, we have got a cell, but it's got a cockroach in there, so we can't use that. Health and safety, I'm afraid. So you'll have to leave him out here.
So I mean, we've talked about the extraordinary performances of Milton Johns and the lovely Colin, but what about Griffin?
Oh, he's great. I love Griffin the chef.
Yeah. But he's, again, such a scene stealer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, if you're in that situation and you've only got a limited amount of screen time, you're going to just do whatever you can to really
just going for
make
it,
an
isn't
impact. Yeah, absolutely. Much like Colin.
Yeah. But it's almost like he's playing it like Griffin is the star of the show. Griffin is the most important character in the story. Mm-hmm. It's quite an impressive performance.
So there's clearly, there's I would say probably 3 performances outside of Troughton's where you have people assuming it's really their show, and I like that. I think it brings so much. No, I'm not interpreting that you are. I think it's so good when you get actors who are kind of I don't know if willing to do that is the right expression, because I think all actors are quite happy to be the centre of attention. That's kind of what the job entails. But to really go, the full Graham Crowden is always commendable.
Well, I was thinking of Bernard Kay as Saladin in the last story that we talked about with Paul.
Yes.
He was very much the hero of his story.
Absolutely. I kind of wonder if during rehearsals that these performers saw Troughton doing his Salamander and gone, oh, that's how we're going to play it. So it almost became a bit of a sort of a competition as to see who could deliver the biggest performance.
That's a wonderful thought. I mean, yes, when you've got this many sort of big beasts in your jungle and you're capable of, butting chests with them, I suppose it's going to bring out the best of everyone. I mean, everyone, I think, irrespective of whether or not you think everyone gives a good performance, I think everyone gives a big performance.
They're certainly interesting performances.
Even the three guys in part one in the helicopter, even their hair is giving a big performance.
Oh, we haven't mentioned Castellan Spandrel yet.
We haven't, no. Pravda.
This is chock full of Doctor Who royalty.
A man who for years, thanks to the Target book, I thought his character was called Deans.
Oh.
Well, you would, wouldn't you? You would. Because without one of those little umlauts over the S, you're never gonna know to give it the silent H.
To be fair, we all had that sort of Mask of Mandragora thing, didn't we?
I totally thought it was Mandragora, yeah.
We won't talk about the Megadon factor.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and I was always disappointed that Tim never turned up in Tim and the Rani. But I might have just read that wrong. So, I think this is just chock full of people giving 110%, or in Colin's case, 210%.
Do you think he had to have a bit of a lie down after they finish each take, just to recover?
I think 3 months at the Priory.
I think we need to talk about the bit in, I think it's episode 3 with the volcanic eruption.
Okay.
Because this is at Salamander's residence, and people are popping out from there to go and have a lovely talk in this nice park. And then we're on the veranda.
Right, we're in Hungary, aren't we? So there's a lovely green, verdant park.
And how far do you think they can see with binoculars?
I mean, 174 feet, I would say, is about standard.
Devastating volcanic eruption causing widespread disaster.
Don't forget, Paul, this is the future, so everything's...
So is there a force field around the villa that's stopping any sort of...
Apart from haircuts, obviously.
They weren't binoculars, they were the forthcoming Apple...
video screen.
Video thing.
Oh, God,
And thus he was
That really took me out of it, I have to say. That scene, I thought, oh, come on, this is just not quite... There's a better way of doing this scene.
I think that's one of the things when you're 5, that would have been absolutely amazing.
Sure.
When you're slightly older and you have that little bit of critical nous, yes, it does kind of push you a little bit from being fully invested in the story. But again, it's a curious distribution of money.
But I mean,
they could have spent more money on that. They could have.
Even if they just wafted some smoke into shot, it would have helped to sell that.
So you've got Milton Johns around the side of the Hungarian, flat, smoking a cigarette, blowing it out into. That would have worked absolutely fine, and I think Milton would have enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. It's just that feeling of a total disconnect between them standing on the balcony and what they're looking at. There's no sense that they're even remotely in the same place.
Are there any volcanoes in Hungary?
There's a mountain range.
Oh, right.
I don't know if that's volcanic. Listeners, writers.
Well, let's just say it is. It seems very much to be the attitude of the writers.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we're going to start watching Doctor Who and start picking apart the science, then we're all in for a bit of a long slog. But you make a fair point there, Paul. But it doesn't affect
Did we
my
all
enjoyment
come to
too
this
much.
story after the Pertwee era?
Yes.
Yes.
So were we all thinking the same thing? Hang on, they're doing the same thing they did in Invasion of Dinosaurs,
Yeah.
rather than it being the other way around. Because it's a group's been kept underground under false pretenses at the bottom of a lift shaft, and being told one thing when it's something else.
I had not thought of that until you brought it up.
But that
And now you've ruined Invasion of the Dinosaurs for me, now. Paul. Thank you so much.
It's the same plot twist, isn't it? And
It really is, yeah.
And it occurs halfway through the story. It just comes out of nowhere in both stories. And I kind of can't help wondering if when they were doing... I mean, Barry Letts directed this story, for goodness sake, and he's the producer on Invasion of Dinosaurs. He must have made the point, we've done this before, let's try it again. He must have been aware of that.
I don't know. I mean, if you're working flat out to get these episodes out the door, maybe. I mean, I don't know. If I think of, for example, the 4 years I worked in, say, a bookshop, I couldn't really tell you what happened month to month, and maybe it's the same for Barry Letts. Maybe he's so busy, and your focus is just on the here and now. Maybe you genuinely don't remember. On the other hand, it's as easy to think he's sitting there in 1970, whatever, going, "What can we do? What worked? What did we do in my first?"
If only they had an
story?
archive where they could just go pop down and get the old episodes out and just watch them back again, rather than relying on the novelisation.
Well, they did. Unfortunately, it was in a hangar in Saudi Arabia, and it's very difficult to get the episodes out of there.
I'm so tempted to think that, and this is just, you got to remember, this is just before Terrence Dix joins the show. Mm-hmm. He literally comes on board with the following story as Derek Sherwin's assistant. And so Terrence probably had some awareness of this story, as did obviously Barry Letts. And I can't help thinking that they were totally aware of this connection, that yes, with Invasion of the Dinosaurs they were doing the same thing again, and it's an awful temptation to go, let's pay tribute to this. Why don't we call one of the characters in Invasion of the Dinosaurs after the original writer?
Did they?
We have a Professor Whitaker.
Oh my God, I haven't seen that story for so long.
Anyone would think you're not a big fan of the Pertwee era, Mark.
Well, I mean,
but that's pure speculation on my part. I've got nothing to back that up. But it's awfully tempting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a small world, and there are not many names they can use by that point that don't kind of evoke someone. But I think the show's still young enough to be an homage.
Tell you what, Paul, if you get asked to do the info text for season 11 on the Blu-ray set, you've set yourself a little task there.
I think the stuff that I get asked to work on is later than that, though, unfortunately. I think all the Pertwee stuff's all sewn up. But we shall see.
Exclusive for you.
We shall see. We shall see.
So, actually, one last thing that we should talk about before we maybe wrap this up is, do we think the ending confrontation kind of came off, or not so much?
I thought it was very good, but there just wasn't quite enough of it.
Yeah.
And I gather from what I've read that it was a very difficult process for them to set up, and they had all sorts of problems trying to make it work. But I think what we got to see was great.
There was a camera fault, I think, which prevented them from doing more.
Sounds right. Yeah.
So it was the only shot they had.
I think we got away with it. They got just enough to sell it. But given we've had 6 episodes building up to this, it would have probably elevated the story to yet another level if you'd had a slightly more substantial confrontation. I don't know.
Yeah, it is kind of jarring that like you say, that we've spent all this time anticipating the confrontation, and it is so brief.
Just leaves you wanting more, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think there's a point that we haven't considered about the whole story, and this comes back to it being a David Whitaker story, is that, to my mind, it's a historical drama. And we can say that because we're in the space year 2023, and obviously it's set in 2018, so from our perspective it is. But I think even at the time, David Whitaker is writing it as if it's one of his historical stories, but it's just set in the future, and that's the incidental nature of it. Because it's got that political intrigue, it's got all that sort of people like backstabbing into each other. It's doing all the things that the Whitaker era of Doctor Who with the historical dramas did. And it just incidentally happens to be set in the future rather than the past, to my mind.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, I was joking when I compared it to Shakespeare earlier, but it is that classic structure, which Whitaker...
It is that structure, yeah.
Whitaker was all over. So, yeah.
Marvellous. Well, I think we should wrap this up and give it a score. And I'm going to come to Iain first.
Oh,
Iain, what would you like?
Fiend!
Yeah.
You rascal! How can you pick? Right, am I marking this on how much fun it was, or how good of a story it is?
Can I ask first, because not being a regular on this, I'm not so familiar with the scoring system. Are we scoring it as in terms of just the Troughton era, or is it Doctor Who as a whole?
Personally, the way you can mark it however you like, but I personally, when I put a mark in, it's usually just based on my personal enjoyment of this story in of itself.
But you have to have a sort of a mental top and a bottom, right?
Yeah, like if Time of Angels is a 10 and the Celestial Toymaker is a 1, that's kind of my...
I guess that's where I'm coming
that's
from.
My rubric,
where do you rank it in terms of any Doctor Who?
Yeah,
okay.
So... Come on, Iain.
I'm gonna give it a 9. I'm gonna take one mark away for the slight shortcomings, perhaps in the story and in the rather cavalier nature we flit from country to country without so much as a crappy effects shot to establish that. But I think in terms of the performances, and mainly the ones we've highlighted and dwelt upon, and of course for Bennick's hair, you can't go lower than a 9.
Wonderful. Paul, what would you like to give this one?
I think possibly a 7 or an 8. Maybe I just go for an 8 to be generous.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I am gonna give it a 10.
Oh.
I love this so much. You've done a wonderful job, the pair of you, of pointing out numerous shortcomings, but it doesn't dull my excitement of watching it again for this. It's just a lot of fun. It's Doctor Who does James Bond. The cast are fantastic. It's worth it just for Bennick alone, and for that reason, I'm going to give it a 10.
I mean, there are shortcomings in Hamlet. That doesn't stop it being an absolute classic, a timeless classic. And this is that good.
So that's what we thought of this story. Let's have some of your feedback and find out what you guys thought of The Enemy of the World.
I've got mail.
Okay, so let's see what you guys think of this story. And first up for me, we've heard from Richard Smith from the Something Who podcast. And Richard says, I always liked this story. The Ian Martin novelisation was compelling and the soundtrack intriguing, but it was improved immeasurably by the moving pictures. Episode 1 is a tour de force and delighted me back in 2013. Great direction, funny, warm, and a great setup for the story. Subsequent episodes are also good. The subterranean lift shuttle is surprisingly well realised. It's quite unusual for a Doctor Who story of this or any era. It's got more in common with Caves of Androzani than the other stories in this season. Yeah, that's a good point there, Richard. He also goes on to say, the main downside is that Salamander's increasing importance to the plot necessarily sidelines the Doctor, and I'd rather have Troughton's multi-dimensional characterisation of the Doctor than his cod Hispanic villain, but Salamander is nuanced and interesting and a proper menace. All in all, one of my favourite 60s stories, with good characterisation, a daft but compelling plot, and a story that sustains throughout its length. I'd reach for this one very easily. Thank you, Richard. And next up, we have heard from Dave Rennie. And Dave has his own podcast. It's called A Kettle and a Piece of String. It's really good. You should check it out. And he has this to say. A very refreshing change to the other stories in the season. It's great it's came back and been reappraised so positively. Troughton is having a ball. Thank you, Dave. And we've also heard from Anthony Carroll. Anthony says, it was great to see it back, but heresy alert, it just does not do it for me. Slow in parts, naff underground dwellers, plot is a bit silly, but Troughton is superb. And love the plate smashing, 6 out of 10 for him. Thank you, Anthony. We have also heard from Rassilonian Legate. And they say, before it was found, it was severely underrated. For me, it's up there as one of Patrick Troughton's best, just because you can really see how good an actor he was. Thank you for that. And we've heard from Niklas Jonsson. And Niklas says, I love Enemy. It has Patrick Troughton playing 3 roles, the Doctor, Salamander, and the Doctor playing Salamander. And the twist halfway genuinely surprised me. I can't say enough good things about it. Thank you, Nicholas. Next up, we've got the other Anthony Carroll. We have 2 Anthony Carrolls. And Anthony Carroll, too, says, I waited till Christmas for the DVD in 2013, and honestly, better than that day's Christmas special. A story that felt so forgotten that the twist bunker hit brilliantly for any first-time watcher like me. The Empire Strikes Back of the Doctor flirts with the main woman protagonist trilogy. He does like to flirt with Astrid in this one. Okay, lastly from me, we have heard from the Metabilis 2 podcast, another great podcast. I believe this is David. So David starts off by saying, Enemy of the World is serious grown-up television where the Doctor has to work out whom to trust and who is telling the truth. Whitaker skillfully depicts complex persons with multiple, even conflicting motivations. What's consistent, though, is that good people work for bad leaders and good people are killed because of this. For a fan of the 1970s, as I am, it's great to see Douglas, Pravda and Johns in these earlier roles. They are cast standouts, as are Netheim, Kerr and Peach. But my favourite guest actor is Carmen Munro as Faria. Munro's portrayal of this trapped woman in a horrible situation is brilliant. Her death is tragic, and like that of Dinesh, is unjust in this bleak retro-future world. I love Troughton's joy at being at the seaside. I love Victoria's cosplaying Jamie and her exasperation with the Doctor wanting to play sandcastles, to her worrying about him, you'll catch your death. Then with her on Jamie's lap in the helicopter. When written and directed this well, I could watch this TARDIS team for more than just season 5, but alas, it was not to be. And that's from David. Thank you very much for that. Well, next up, we have got some audio from the legend that is Andy Moore.
Right, my dear, I'm off to the location shoot.
OK, Patrick, have a lovely time, and say hello to Fraser for me, won't you?
Yes, OK, will do. Bye now. Hello, my dear. No. Hello, my dear. Yeah. Hello, my dear, I'm home.
And what time do you call this, Mr. Salamander, eh?
I'm so sorry, my dear. I got held up doing sciencey stuff and things, you know? Supper, it smells excellent, though.
Oh, it smells excellent, does it, eh? Well, this isn't for you, this is for me and the kids. Yours is in the dog because you didn't bloody come home. And another thing, I want to know...
Well, chaps, what did you make of that one?
Very legal gentleman.
Yes. I'm waiting for the lawyers to get in touch.
Yeah. But we've got Andy Moore's home address, right?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, good. Just checking.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Andy. That was brilliant. Ian, who have you heard from?
I have heard from a very large number of people by the just scrolling down what you've said. Jesus, I'm going to be here all night. Oh, strap yourselves in, everyone. Or perhaps we'll put my list out as a second episode. I've heard from Etapalak, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Please get in touch and tell me how to say it. Who says, fun while it's there, and chock full of lots of well-acted and nicely observed characters, but the lack of sci-fi elements in the James Bond plot mean it doesn't really feel like Doctor Who, and more like a standard 60s action show. 6 out of 10. Other end of the spectrum, Dwayne Bunny, I'm not implying, Dwayne, that you're on the spectrum, who says, on seeing this in full for the first time, it instantly became my favourite Second Doctor story. Utterly brilliant in every way, Troughton is magnificent. I mean, you can't argue with that, can you?
You certainly can't.
John Rivers has a fascinating and insightful stream of consciousness. Carmen Munro, playing Faria, is great in this story. She was also great as Desmond's wife, Shirley, in the sitcom Desmond's. Come to think of it...
I remember Desmond's.
Come to think of it, Desmond's was great too. Bring back Desmond's. That spin-off Pork Pie wasn't so good, though. So, thank you, John. I'll have to Google that now, because I'd love to see a bit more of her. She was very, very good. Philip Edney. So we've completed the Sirens of Audio Dream Team here. This may be the best Troughton story ever recorded. Part of its brilliance is... it is nothing like anything else around it. A thriller, a disaster film, a whodunit, a dystopian diatribe, a tragedy. More Bond than Who, the hero and the villain played by one of the best actors ever on British TV, Troughton himself. The rest of the cast do not disappoint either, they really don't. The scope of the story is also so huge. Part of the joy is that it was unknown to be this good until it was found. Episode 3 was better than it was given credit. But now the rest is found, we know it was the weakest episode. An absolute delight, if only they had the technology to do more split screens. I never tire of watching this. Now, next up is our good old friend Dave Kitchen. He's always got an exciting outlier of an opinion.
Hello,
Do we
Dave.
think he's going to like it? Do we think he's not?
Oh, I'm gonna say he's gonna like it.
Okay, it's going to be one extreme or the other. Middle of the pack in the romp that is Season 5. Part 1 is great, so straight away we're at loggerheads. Most of the cast are excellent. It's an enjoyable story. I do think the pacing is off, though. The Doctor spends several episodes bumming around wondering if Salamander is really a baddie. Given we, the audience, see Salamander being a dick from Part 1, the Doctor just seems a bit of a fool as they try to stall the plot. I'd say he looks like a bit of a fool doing that sort of flying scissor kick as he runs around on the beach, but, you know, each to their own. The underground base is the best thing in it, but I reckon comes into the story way too late. Don't get me wrong, a great adventure, but I think there's better this year. 2 out of 2. Now, either he's alluding to the fact that this is his second tweet, or he's given the story 2 out of 2, which, in my book, is 10 out of 10.
I mean, that's 100%.
Yeah, it's not wrong. The Lord Reverend Cole Igneous Mo, and again, I've probably butchered that. I loved the book when I was at school. The scale of it was so massive. Australia and Hungary in one story. I wasn't disappointed in the episodes. They're brilliant. Adrian Berry says, one of the Target books I held back from getting. Wasn't a fan when I saw an episode on the Troughton Years video. When Web of Fear and this got found, I thought great to have Web, still indifferent. Watched it and completely changed my mind. Troughton is brilliant. Camo Hat Man. Such an intricate and impressive story. I don't know what delivery that was. I've got such an intricate. I'll do them all in silly voices. That'll lend nothing to the proceedings. Sorry, Camo Hat Man. Let me take a running jump and come at this again. Such an intricate and impressive story. The highlight is definitely Troughton's dual roles, and he plays both parts brilliantly. I love the final scene of episode 6, where Salamander has his big brutal death scene being sucked out into the time vortex. Very glad this was recovered. And finally, from the Randomizer Pod, and I'm guessing Tim from the Randomizer Pod, I mean, I've got a 50-50 chance of being right. He says of the story, balmiest plot twist ever with the whole underground society thing. Also, keeping someone captive in a corridor brings a whole new meaning to open prison. Absolutely. Comedy chef, good plot lines for Jamie and Victoria. Mary Peach is awesome. George Pravda. Milton Johns. Double Troughton. Love it all. Such a great rediscovery.
There's a lot of love for this story. And Paul, who have you heard from?
Ooh, we've heard from Linton Keneally. Hello, Linton. And Linton says, probably the most underrated story till its discovery in 2013. I think we're mostly in agreement with that.
Yes.
Darren Lodge. Hello, Darren. Darren says, a little gem this one. Not a monster story or a base under siege either. Just a great spy story and the Doctor playing dressing up. Although he's not dressing up when he's on the beach.
No.
He's dressing down. Nathan Bottomley, hello Nathan, says, brilliant, best of a fairly dreary season. Ooh, was the rest of the season dreary?
Damning with faint praise there, Nathan.
Cliff, any voice work going? That's an unusual name. Do your parents call you that?
He's giving himself a plug there. That's
Cliff,
quite
any voice
inventive.
work going? ? Chapman says, astonishingly good and bodes well for other forgotten stories if ever recovered. Troughton is magnificent. Guest cast all great. Never really got into the audio, so seeing how it carries on after the very familiar episode 3 was as thrilling as episode 1 or episode 6. Simon Moore, he's got a 2-part tweet here. Hello, Simon. Simon says, I must have been one of the few to love the then solo surviving episode 3. The setting so intrigued me, and Troughton is brilliant as Salamander in that episode. The Telesnap recon gripped me. It was one of the few recons like Power that I will return to. And he goes on to say, such a great supporting cast and an engaging story which goes the distance. My only criticism is that the end is very rushed. Yeah, I think we agree with that.
Yeah, that's true.
If the last 10 minutes had filled the entirety of the last episode, it would have worked better. But love this one despite any niggling flaws. Adam Taylor. Adam says, I was bored this morning and decided to put this on. My partner stopped what she was doing and watched all 6 parts and audibly gasped when we found out Salamander has an underground base and that Kent is a double agent. She now claims it as her favourite story she's seen.
Yay!
That also begs the immediate question, how many stories has your partner seen? It may be the only one. And we've also heard from 26 Glorious Years. Hello, 26. Great casting throughout. Eye-catching model work. How wonderful to have those visuals at last for episode 4. And that much-anticipated face-off, no pun intended, in the final scene. Oh, and when I bought the Troughton Years VHS, I was intrigued rather than underwhelmed by episode 3. Smiley face. And that's my lot.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for getting in touch. We really do appreciate hearing what you think of these stories. And if you'd like to do that on a future story, all the various ways and means are listed over our end credits. So before we say goodbye to Paul, we are going to do some recommendations.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, so Paul, what have you got for our listeners?
what I've been enjoying at the moment is I've been reading a series of books by an author called Mick Herron.
Oh.
And he writes a series of crime novels. You may be familiar with the television series Slow Horses. Have you watched that?
I have heard of it. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard all good things about it. Yeah.
Highly recommended. I discovered the television series in its first season. There's 2 seasons of it so far, and I immediately looked up, started trying to track down the novels on which they're based, and there's a whole series of books, and very, very, very well written. Highly recommended. The television series is great, but the books are much better. There's so much more detail and character development in them. They're in a nutshell, they're about a rebel bunch of disgraced MI5 agents in a rundown building in London who take on these spy jobs that MI5 don't want to dirty their hands with. And it's run by a character called Jackson Lamb, who is probably the most obnoxious character you could ever come across in fiction. and Mick Herron goes into great detail explaining all about his disgusting habits, his drunkenness, his smoking, his wiping his hand on his nose and then on his clothes and all this sort of thing. It's just, the vividness of the writing is just extraordinary, and all the characters come alive on the page, and they really, really are highly recommended. I've read all of the Slow Horses books now, which has kind of spoilt the rest of the television series when they come out for me, even though I will catch them. But I will say that the television series is taking a slightly different path with the characters, so there's a lot there's a lot that you won't necessarily sort of have
still
spoiled
worth
for
reading
you.
the books.
Yeah, definitely. There's a high mortality rate in the series. You can fall in love with a character and you're absolutely convinced they're the main character, and then they get killed off in the next book. Very, very suddenly.
This is sounding a bit like, I don't know if you know a UK show called Spooks.
Yeah, yes. I was going to say, if you like Spooks, then definitely this is the natural successor. So
I think I'll have to give that a try then.
Yeah. So
great recommendation, Paul.
Brilliant.
Ian, what have you got for us?
I'll give you 2 this time around, because I think I owe you one from a previous episode where I hadn't absorbed any culture. So firstly, on the subject of people trapped in an underground silo, I've been really enjoying the Apple TV show Silo, based on the Wool novels by, I want to say, Hugh Howey. I'm not going to say too much about the show, other than if you like bleak science fiction, this is right up your Strasser, or down your silo, as we say. No one says that. No one says that. And secondly, in the world of podcasting, I've been very much enjoying Call Jonathan Pye. Anyone who's got Facebook will know who Jonathan Pye is, and will have seen his sweary, ranty, news broadcasts. This is a full comedy series where the character is given his own late night phone-in show, and basically struggles to contain his sweary rants. He fails, and there are sweary rants. If you like swearing and ranting about politics and inside baseball, I do. This is, again, very much the thing for you.
Do you know I had Silo down as my second choice for my recommendation, so I'm glad I went with Mick Herron, so I wasn't overlapping with you then.
Wonderful, thanks Ian. Mine is perhaps not quite as highbrow as either of yours, but I do find it incredibly entertaining. I have decided to go back to the start and rewatch Ted Lasso, which is a show on Apple TV Plus. The final season is just finished, but I got into it and suggested my wife might like to watch it as well. She's not a football fan at all, but she really enjoyed the first season, so we're now embarking on season 2, so I can't wait to see what happens, because I've already seen the first 2 seasons. So we're just going to work our way through those and get up to season 3. So the idea in a nutshell is that there's a Premier League football club which has come into the ownership of a woman who's just settled a rather bitter divorce, and she got ownership of the club, and her idea is to get her own back on her husband. She will run it into the ground by hiring someone she feels is completely inappropriate to be the manager of the team, named Ted Lasso, who has done incredible things in American football, but knows next to nothing about football as we call it in the UK. And I mean, football is the thing that kind of starts the whole thing rolling, but it's not really about the football so much as the character dynamics, and it's got a great cast and it's very funny, and I would certainly recommend it.
You're about the fourth person to recommend that series to me, but I haven't actually watched a single episode of it yet.
It's great. I mean, you don't have to like football to.
Well, I
to
don't,
enjoy
so
it.
that's the thing that's off-put me from watching.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, give it a try, and I think you might be pleasantly surprised.
No, I will do. Will do.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on again. It's been lovely to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've been thoroughly enjoying myself.
Excellent. Do you have anything you'd like to give a little plug to before you disappear?
I'm still working on. I have to be very careful. What's come out that I've worked on? I seem to work so far ahead on things. I'm doing Blu-ray subtitles for most of the box sets that are coming out. So most of the ones, but not all of the ones that come out have got me on them. I recorded a audio commentary for the season 2 box set on The Lion, so have a listen to that.
Yes, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I also write regularly for Panini for Doctor Who magazine. I do a regular series of columns in the brilliant Chronicles bookazine series about the comic strips called State of the Art. So each time there's a different year that the Chronicles are looking at, I've got an article about what the comic strips are doing in that year. So that's a regular from me. And I also write. Is your book
still available?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's still in print.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the ever-present threat of a second volume. And and I'm also on comics. I'm writing commentaries for the Panini graphic novels, which appear in the back of the book.
Oh, wow.
So that's a recent gig for me. I've done so far. I've done ones for the 2 Dalek volumes.
Nice.
They're hopefully, fingers crossed, going to keep going.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been lovely to have you back.
Thank you. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, we shall. So, until next time, when we'll be taking a trip down into the underground. I was Mark.
I was Iain.
And I was Paul.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.